Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Francine Witte, trapped in a fake bookstore forever. And this is the FBOMB Global Flash reading. I'm zooming to you from New York City, which is where this picture was taken. This is from the Housing Works bookstore. People always ask me about it, which is downtown New York City. And so we have a great lineup of flash fiction for you tonight. We thank you all for being here. Um, so I'm going to start us off. I like to just kind of warm things up um, by reading something so that no one has to go first. No one ever wants to go first. I like to go first. This is called Death and His Family. Death's wife is always apologizing to the members of the I Heart Books book club. This time it's Sally, whose husband folded over sudden and heart-stabbed. Death's wife had pleaded with Death, "Stop taking my friends' husbands." But he didn't listen. Death's wife remembers their beginning, how he would tell her the world needed Death. If everyone lived forever, he said, we'd be up to our necks in people and there wouldn't be any parking. Death's wife remembers how handsome he was. None of that long robe and sickle. But as the years went on, he shut her out more and more, and she turned to Despair, who held her in his arms on Wednesdays and told her about babies who didn't have drinking water, until finally she couldn't take it anymore. Now she's having an affair with Hope. She is starting to feel a bit better, brings him along to her book club, and tells the women he's her cousin from Detroit, and Hope tells the women how things will get better. Just like the book they are reading will get better. The women look at Hope. Death's wife looks at Hope. They eat their tea sandwiches and wait. Death's son has been playing with cap guns and wind gusts, learning to twirl them into hurricanes. He knows what his future is, how he will have to take over the family business when the old man retires. Death's son has a vague recall of his grandpa, how he was there one day and the next day he was a cloud. Death's son knows his destiny. Still, he can't help but think what it might be like to have to be a farmer who grows things, a bus driver who takes people places. "I'd like to make people happy," he said out loud to his mirror once, but stuffed it back down in his throat. Death's daughter wants a whole other family. Death's mistress is frankly exhausted. She's had it with his constant promises to change. She would like to do something drastic, but she knows you can't kill Death, that it's way too meta. She remembers when the whole Black Road thing was sexy, mysterioso, but now it's little more than a ratty bathrobe to her. Death's mistress used to want Death all to herself. She used to think of plots to call Death's wife, threatened to leave him, but always fell under his kiss spell. Kiss of Death, she called it. And then she discovered Kiss of Death was already a thing. In the end, she knows Death hasn't bothered to change in how many million years? Not likely to happen anytime soon, she figures. Death's uncle remembers the old days, plagues and sword smite. Those were easy. He would watch his brother Death Sr. wipe whole villages off the map. But it wasn't all good, if he's honest. First of all, Death's uncle could never shake the feeling that he got shut out of the family business. And now, what was he supposed to do with his dead life? Death's uncle wouldn't have taken the easy way out. Death's uncle wouldn't have stood at the top of a cliff wanting to end all of this, evaporating slowly into a cloud. Death's mother, well, he didn't have one. Death's father, Death Sr., always wanting to know how this happened. For example, why wasn't he allowed the luxury of a ticking clock? He knew he was necessary, part of the life cycle and all, but maybe he wanted something else. Or even once he wanted to be loved. And then there was the whole eternity thing. Yes, his father retired, stuffed himself into a dormant volcano somewhere, but Death Sr. didn't want that. He wanted his own death somehow. Days on days, he would stand there just looking up and ask, if I'm going to be around forever, where's the urgency? Where's the anything that will make this whole thing have some goddamn meaning? Death himself is busy driving into walls and thinking up diseases. Everything changes, Death laments, but not me. I'm just the same as my father, my son. When somebody dies, there is always sadness. It makes the papers. Death used to like the feeling of power he had, but not now. He does still believe what he told his wife all those many years ago. If everyone lived forever, and how would that look? People on people on people, and no need to travel or love anyone harder because things are fragile. Life is fragile. But every so often, he looks into the eyes of a young widow or flips on the evening news. There he is again, gunshots and virus, famine and war. It's all so boring, and yet there's no alternative. He goes up to the top of a mountain, stands there like he remembers his uncle telling him Death's father used to do. Death knows he can't pull off the same cloud escape as his father. Still, he can't help but look up at the sky. And just at that moment, he is pulled by the soft mewing of a lost kitten, somewhere stuck in a drain. This is the time he hates himself most. Moment of choice, Death thinks. I could pretend I don't hear anything. He could go and have a cup of coffee. But in the end, he knows better. And so he moves off to the scene. When he sees a fireman pulling the kitten to safety, Death is relieved. A little girl takes the kitten from the fireman's arms, a swell of arms and kisses and thank yous. The little girl's mother finally takes her home, all the while looking over her shoulder, seeing Death's ever shadow fading for now and rising towards the sky. Little jolly little thing to start us off with. Hey, well, thank you. So um, this whole extravaganza, FBOMB, New York City, was started by the wonderful Paul Beckman, and he was supposed to be reading tonight, but he's unfortunately in the hospital. I don't have more details, but you know, I'll fill you in as soon as I know anything, unless maybe some of you are in contact with Paul. So he started this reading at the KGB bar in person, and then he moved it to Zoom during the pandemic, which I personally like because a lot of you wouldn't be here right now if if not for that. So if not for the Zoom, so I'm going to read my favorite piece of Paul's. Anytime I'm ever asked to read anything for Paul, this is the one I choose just because I love it so much. And it's from his book, Kiss Kiss. And it's called Honey and Darling. I hear them whispering to each other over dinner. My dining area backs to theirs, and for some reason, in one small section of the wall, I can hear everything. I found it by accident with one of the previous tenants. Perhaps when the building was built, the insulation was left out, or the builders did something intentionally to cause this. It only works one way, them to me. I'm sure of that, and would bet my life on it after living here through 4 other tenants. He calls her honey, and she calls him darling, and their mailbox name slot is blank. They're cautious and only talk to each other in whispers. Obviously, they must know that the walls in this building are thin, but they can't know how thin in this one spot. I might as well be in their room with them. I keep my table next to the door and eat my dinner when they have theirs, listening to them share their day's experiences and more. I heard Honey tell Darling about a company that her company was about to buy, and so I bought stock and made several $1,000s. She's the boss's secretary. Another time, she told him about a stock that was about to tank, and I shorted it and made even more. There have been others, and I don't go crazy on these tips because I'm not greedy and don't want to bring suspicion down on my head. Besides, They keep coming. Darling is a gangster. He lends money, breaks legs, pulls heists, and worse. He tells Honey everything. I hope to write a gangster book one of these days, so I keep my laptop on the table during dinner. At times, I'm so busy listening and writing, my meal grows cold. At dinner this evening, I listened as Darling said that he had to go leave for a bit, take care of a problem. I have to squash a bug, he said, but I won't be long. I heard him push his chair back and walk up to the door. I heard the door squeak of it opening. I heard a knock on my door. I love that. Paul Beckman, the one and only. Okay, so now that we're all warmed up here, let's make it even hotter. So we're going to start with Cindy Rosmus. Cindy Rosmus is originally from the Ironbound section of Newark, New Jersey, once voted the unfriendliest city on the planet, but she's nicer now. She's published 7 collections of short stories and is the editor, art director of the crime fiction webzine Yellow Mama. She's a Gemini, a Christian, and an animal rights advocate. Cindy Rosmus.
Hi, guys. So glad to be here. I'm praying Paul's okay. You know, he's our flesh fiction god, and he's our founder. He's our guru. You know, I'm reading this. Okay, I'm going to read a flash piece and a micro piece. This one's called Hell to Pay. I have a lot of weird shit that's been going on in my building lately, but this is fictionalized. Of course, you all know. Squatters, we felt like, on a construction site. Non-stop sawing, drilling, banging. On Sundays, too. Even God, I thought, took a day off. Like that weird mansion, the Winchester in California, that never stopped building itself. I pictured stairways leading to doors that opened to nowhere, except hell. When we saw them in the hall, the workers looked right through us. One day, I thought, I'd sneak through one of those doors. We paid rent, but not enough for these new landlords, trying to squeeze us out like the last bit of toothpaste from a no-frills tube. Greedy, inconsiderate fucks. But old-timers like Dan Brennan in 2C and Miss Roberts in 1D defied them, refused to leave. 40 years they lived here. Regomaniacs, hair metal bands like Poison, Motley Crue. My wild youth was just taking off when they moved in plastic-covered couches and other gross stuff. Most of them sure were still here. If they could torch us, we'd be ashes. But we came with the building. Brennan's empty snake tank with the new blonde wood floors. The stench of cat piss with antique white walls. Creaking old bones with marble shower tiles. The lack of heat in those fancy pants bathrooms would make new tenants sick. Like us. Radiators died. DIY heating units took over with remotes we couldn't figure out. Forced to pay our own heat now, so Miss Roberts slept under 5 Afghan shawls topped by shivering cats. On her sad monthly check, she couldn't afford food for herself, so she shared theirs. Freezing hallways, too, so you saw your breath in the air, but not the workers. This had to stop. One day on the workers' lunch break, I walked the halls of my own Afghan. So many rooms had been destroyed and rebuilt, like a war zone. Debris was everywhere. In one corner, an empty Coors Light bottle, a foil-wrapped half sandwich, a banana peel. Dust swirled in front of me, like a Dixonian ghost it beckoned. My stomach tightened. No. It turned and seemed to float up the stairs. I started back to my own place. Well, where was it? Suddenly I felt confused. Lost in my own apartment building. It's not fair, I yelled up the stairs. This is my home. Is it? Wrapping myself snugly in the Afghan, I followed the spectral voice up to the next floor, then the next, then one more. Not realizing that we'd passed the top floor a while back, I walked into a palatial, toasty, warm room. In the distance was familiar laughter, meows, a cork popping, the smell of meatballs and gravy like only I could make. I left the Afghan where it fell. In my micro story, real fast, I want to tell you, Punk Noir had a challenge, 200 words or less about dystopia. Okay. Deadline was like a week ago. Maybe it's still going on, but anyway, this was my submission. I don't know if they accepted it. Mine's called Hystopia. Our leader hates cats, and so do we. Frozen smile. No, he can't read minds. This is madness. I love cats, even straggly strays. But since our leader saved us, all cats vanished, except Precious, my little mischief maker, toilet paper shredder, white with black over one green eye and those velvety pink ears. Last week you'd be burned alive for reading a banned book. Now, because himself hates cats, my owning one makes me charred meat. Madness. Cats love windows. I'd hung drapes to block neighbors' view. Across the rug, Precious saunters, stops, then turns and licks her belly. When her food runs out, then what? And there's no more litter. The stench of piss will give us away. Our leader, who'd kill a fur ball with baby pink ears out of hatred, or maybe fear. Years back, I was shocked awake. In his crib, our giant tabby lay on my brother's chest. He couldn't breathe. Our big sister, eyes bulging with fear, just watched. When I grabbed it, the beast hissed and clawed. Footsteps I hear now racing up the stairs, sent by our leader, Scaredy Cat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Cindy Rosmus, wonderful as always.
Thank you.
Wonderful energy. You always have such great energy that you bring to us. Okay, next we're going to hear from Ron Bass. Ron Bass is the author of To My 25th Century Biographers, a collection of poetry and short fiction published in 2023 by Approximetrics Press. His previous book, The Velveeta Underground, I love that title, is a collection of longer stories and one-act plays published in 2006 as part of his EAA Signature Series. Ron Bass.
Hi, I'm going to read two pieces, a flash piece and a micro piece that are part of a longer work that's titled A Dry Prustini. The flash piece is Involuntary Sobriety. Oswald Ozzie Contman was at a crossroads in his career. After 11 overdoses, 7 trips to the ER, and 3 occasions on which his heart stopped, he discovered he was no longer capable of getting off on drugs or alcohol. His first record release after this unfortunate revelation was a 45 RPM cover of the old Fug song, I Couldn't Get High. Then he released a vinyl-only album of acoustic straight-edge covers heavy on minor threat. On stage between songs, he was now given to talking about his family, most often his grandfather's grandfather, Le Duc, Marcel Contin, who was guillotined in 1793, and his great-uncle Aristide Contin, a minor symbolist poet who died one evening while drinking absinthe with Henri Toulouse-Lautrec. In another compartment of Ozzie's rigorously segmented professional life, he was a highly successful investor and financial blogger with a full subscription price, $50,000 a year, under the name of Keynes von Hayek. Early on, he discovered that heroin anthropomorphized the markets, and the markets, chatty Cathys all, just couldn't wait to divulge their secrets to anyone who was capable of listening, and he knew so few were capable of doing so. The last post he wrote while under the influence was titled, Investing in Uncle Xi's Chemical Warehouse, aka the People's Republic of China. After pushing the send button on that one, he remarked silently that it was a good thing he didn't stint on security. To the best of his knowledge, nobody had yet connected Ozzie Contman with Keynes von Hayek. As the lead guitarist, lyricist, and lead singer of Young Werther and the Sorrows, virtually all of his public and private utterances could be categorized under the holy trinity of sex and drugs and rock and roll. But he was a master of disguises who could put himself together in such a fashion as to go unnoticed at least as Ozzy Cotton, while strolling through the galleries of the Kunsthistorisches Museum or the Hermitage or El Prado. People who did engage with him in museum conversations usually remembered a slightly pedantic academic with a seemingly encyclopedic knowledge of art history, with a special emphasis on Northern European painting of the 15th through 18th centuries. Involuntary sobriety had played havoc with Ozzy's love life. His current girlfriend, available exes, and willing future prospects were all drug fiends of one variety or another. Now he had no use for any of them. He had moved on even before realizing he had done so, and so had his current girlfriend. 2 days after Ozzy announced that he was leaving Young Werther and the Sorrows, Clarissa R. McTeague, a former Alvin Ailey dancer, told him she was in love with Fentanyl, the bass player in the band. Fentanyl, born Lorenzo Fenton IV into the Lakeshore Drive family known as the Medici of the meatpacking industry, was by far the druggiest druggie in the band. The third time they encountered each other, Ozzy Cotton and Laurel Coverdale finally spoke. They knew each other by sight and by reputation, but had never actually met. The first occasion was sitting across the room from each other at a Matthew Shipp performance at the Stone on Avenue C. The second was in the Chinese Scholars Garden at Snug Harbor. Then at the Paul Laffoley retrospective at Kent Fine Art, where they were the only visitors, after aimlessly circling each other for 10 minutes, Laurel approached Ozzy and confided, "It's just amazing how wrong major museums tend to be about contemporary artists." By tacit agreement, they spent the next 3 hours wandering through several dozen Chelsea galleries, followed that with a stroll down to Cowgirl Hall of Fame for dinner, a rack of ribs for Ozzy and bourbon pork chops for Laurel. The repast continued with a cheese and fruit plate and a pot of espresso at Laurel's loft on Green Street, after which she beckoned him to a partitioned off section of the loft housing her musical instruments and recording studio. Picking up a 1966 Telecaster, Ozzy fingerpicked a blistering intro to Mandela's on My Pillow, the freak folkabilly hit song she recorded with her sister Lisa 10 years ago under the name The Astralettes. Laurel, picking up her cue, sang the opening stanza. Mandela's on my pillow, told a tale on me. Mandela's on my pillow, nearly set me free. With White Tara in the saddle, we're heading west as west can be. Then at practically the same instant, they started laughing hysterically. And the micro piece, takes place 15 years later, is titled Lady Meemsley. Laura Coverdale met Lester, Lord Meemsley, while they were both in St. James's Park looking at birds. She immediately observed that he was too good looking and too well put together to possibly be heterosexual. Nevertheless, she found herself quite attracted to him, and he seemed to be quite attracted to her. They talked for hours. He invited her to tea the next day at his house in Marylebone. Laura was still smarting from a breakup with Ozzy Cotton, who was now, she suspected, off the wagon again. When Meemsley kissed her goodbye, she knew she was smitten, as well as quite confused given the lack of congruency in their sexual orientations. Nonetheless, they married 4 months later. Laura found herself as Lady Meemsley, the mistress of a Georgian mansion in Marylebone and a 16th century manor house in Oxfordshire, in addition to her loft on Spring Street and her house in Hudson. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Ron. That was great. Ron Bass. So I always like to take a moment or so to thank all the people who are not reading, who have been really lovely enough to come and spend their Friday evening, or in some cases later, with us here in the Zoom room at the FBOMB. So I just want to give them a little shout out and say hi to Pamela Painter, David Bright, Maria Scarville, Rachel Smith, Bruce Costello, Bernice Holtzman, Jeff Harvey, Jason Butkowski, Mildred Lynn, Becky Parker, Michael Davis, Barbara Deal, Jamie S., that's all that we have there, Tom Haight, Calliope Pelios, and Mileva Anastasia Du. And if I missed you, please put your name in the chat and I'll say hello to you afterwards. Okay, but really, we do appreciate it so much, because it's just wonderful to have you here. Okay, next we're going to move on to Bill Merklee. Bill Merklee's work has appeared in numerous journals and in Best Microfiction and has been nominated for Best Small Fictions. He was shortlisted for the Bath Novella in Flash Award and the Fractured Lit Chapbook Prize, and longlisted for the Wigleaf Top 50. He lives in New Jersey. Bill Merklee.
Thank you, Francine. Before I read this piece of Flash, I just wanted to mention that I have a longer story that I can't read here because it's 2,500 words, but it's coming out at the end of the month in Stanchion magazine, which is print, which just stuns me. But I just wanted to give them a plug and put the link in because he's selling, or he's taking pre-orders for the magazine at a discount. So I'm just going to put that in the chat if anybody's interested. And that's that. I'm going to read something that I think I read a draft of some months back, but Zvi was kind enough to publish it in 10 by 10 flash fiction, so I thought I would read it here. And it's called White Paper Gown. Outside, the day is an oven. That doesn't deter the handful of protesters across the street. They're quiet, but their signs scream alternatives. We've already considered them. But at 18, neither of us makes much money, and Allie's dad is perfectly capable of killing us both. Inside, the room is a washed-out Polaroid, the air clean as crisp linen. My sweaty arms cool quickly, making the hairs feel brittle. I pay at the window while Allie fills out forms. Every bill in my wallet feels like sandpaper. She's called in minutes later. I take Allie's hand and she squeezes hard, like she wants me to stay with her. I watch the double doors swing closed. Everyone in that waiting room is sitting on the same edge. I feel their eyes on me. I'm the only male in there. I pretend to read a magazine. 3 cups of water fail to wash the metallic taste from my mouth. This could be a hospital, a courtroom, a church, places we go to reset, places where some make peace with their God. They bring Allie out in a wheelchair, assure me it's just protocol. The gown was white, she says. White paper. Allie needs time before going home to act like nothing happened. We drive to my house saying nothing. My parents won't suspect anything. They think she's a quiet girl anyway. I turn on the TV and we sink into the sofa. Mom brings us lemonade. I take Allie's hand, hold it like a baby's, like she might break. She takes it back. Thank you.
Nice, Bill. Bill Merklee, thank you for being here with us tonight. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Reading. Okay, next we're going to hear, oh, and by the way, you know, people, after you read, make sure you're looking at the chat because people are saying nice things, and it's great if you're so moved to write something in the chat, like you have like a line that you heard, or just you know, yeah, good story, whatever. It's really very well received by the readers. So please continue to use the chat. Okay, next we're going to hear from Christopher Bowen. He is the author of the chapbook We Were Giants, the novella When I Return to You, I Will Be Unfed, and the nonfiction Debt. And he was the semifinalist. I think I messed that up, so Chris, you can correct me there. He was a semifinalist in the 2017 Faulkner Wisdom Novella Competition, and honorable mention in the 45th New Millennium Writing Awards in the nonfiction category. His short story collection, The Things They Forgot to Tell Us When They Left, is forthcoming from Cervena Barva Press. Christopher Bowen.
Thank you, Francine. I'm going to read a couple short flash fiction. I'm just going to go ahead and go into it. This first one is called The Orchid of the House. Being with her the nights the two of you danced on the back patio, the accidental knocking over of the potted orchid laying in a cracked jar at your feet, all because of the red wine. How both of you laughed and ignored the whole thing in the carelessness of the moment. Flaws of the exposed ground roots, the broken stem, the flower left beaming at your feet as you danced in front of it like street performers. Then the crack of clay shards and the dirt beneath your hard loafers while spinning her. Somehow she remembers you this way. You purchased the house and the patio, the arched lattice behind spoken vows, a trestle over the bridge from the wedding photos. Oak furniture your grandfather gives you, he sands and mends, coughing with the dust in his workshop forever. Moments like this pass like water through the fingers. A morning splash of cold tap water to the face helps you remember. Later that day, it's the sunset closing in on the beach like a slit winking eye. Certain things about yourself, the ones you couldn't grasp then, remain a mystery and pass too. The weight of what you meant to her. Winds bend beach grass to a hollow center as it does the valleys through the mountains. The softness of her hair up in the breeze, the smile of her head bent back as you dipped her a glass of red wine in one hand. She did not know what would happen next, and out of all of the infinite timelines left on Earth, this is the one in which somehow you both shine. This one's called The Borrowing. This was published a while ago. It's a part of my first chapbook, The Borrowing. Every day he borrowed something, borrowing stuff through life that was his like nothing whipped into cotton candy. And at the fair, he borrowed cotton candy. He borrowed the neighbor's mower once and cut his grass because he liked cutting grass on Sundays, and his mower wouldn't be out of the shop until the following day, which was Monday. I never met a man who borrowed so much, like when gas prices hiked for a week straight, and he borrowed rides from people in the office like John or Bill. Then the week wore out and the prices fell too, and he stopped borrowing that from them. Sid never gave much thought to his borrowing, the borrowing man he'd become, until he sat on my concrete suburban steps and cried, borrowing tears from angels because it was raining that night, and Grandpa always told me that's when angels cry. The awning kept us dry as we talked about the past and future and into where our graves might be. I thought he wanted to borrow mine, but put the thought down at first sight. How has my life come to this, Jane? He asked, borrowing words from God knows where, but probably the past. Years ago, he asked me, how has our life come to this? It's a simple exchange of words, my and our. And I remembered how he borrowed me once, my heart and my everything for so long, then stopped borrowing it for days into weeks and months and finally a divorce. Afterward, the borrowing between he and I finally stopped. He borrowed from other people, some of them women, others were friends and family. He borrowed memories this way and forgot about us and our history until tonight, sitting at my front door, the screen flapping against the slight breeze, carrying with it drizzle of angel tears and snot while they wiped their faces, and he did too. I didn't let him in because he would borrow something. When he asked for some tissues or something to wipe away that had come out of him in the situation, still I wouldn't lend him anything. I lent my listening there on that porch and awning, and that was enough. He borrowed all this, and that was all he could. He wiped his face on the sleeve of his buttoned-up office work shirt and began to sober up to the reality of what his life really had become. I never knew a man to change so drastically as when I refused something as insignificant as tissues. I denied him tissues, and he straightened himself and thanked me again for all I'd done in giving him my time and exactly how precious that time really was to him. I told him he could borrow my ears anytime, and though it had been years since I'd seen him or even talked to him in person like that and not on the phone, I think he'd really taken it to heart. The only reason I say this is because he jumbled with his keys to his car in the driveway, trying to unlock the car door, and I thought for a second, this man has changed. There was a jingling of a lot of things, including the inner lock to my inner box where I kept my secrets and love locked so tight and secure and away from the rainy night. There was a jingling of coins in his left pant pocket, and that's not where the keys had been. There was a jingling of my cell phone inside the house behind my shoulders, myself poised on the porch for the forward motion of the new man come back from his car. But he didn't, and we said goodbye, and I knew that there would be a new day for him to borrow in. The day, the sun, and on into winter and death's passing, like fog to a window from his borrowed breath. Thank you.
Oh, that was beautiful, Chris. Christopher Bowen. It's just so nice to, I just want to say I have my captions turned on at the bottom. You can do that. You can put your captions on. And because I like to read along with it. I'm just that kind of person. I like to read and listen at the same time. Um, and I've been just struck by the gorgeous language and imagery so far tonight, and there's only more to come. So, um, Christopher Bowen, thank you for being with us tonight. Next, we're going to hear from Gary Fink. He's published 12 collections of stories, including Sorry I Worried You, winner of the Flannery O'Connor Prize, and The Killer's Dog, winner of the Elixir Press Fiction Prize. His stories have appeared in such journals as the Missouri Review, the Kenyon Review, Black Warrior Review, Crazy Horse, the Idaho Review, and Cimarron Review. His most recent flash collection is The History of the Baker's Dozen, Pelicanesis 2024. His newest book is For Now, We Have Been Spared, a collection of poetry published last week by Slant Books. Gary Fink.
Thanks, Francine. In fact, I ran downstairs and found a copy of the book, and I found a way to make a plug for poetry here in among the stories, because I'm going to read three pieces. The last one's quite short, from oldest to newest. And the oldest one was originally published as a flash fiction piece in the Moon City Review. And since that time, for that collection of poems that Francine mentioned, I tightened it up and pushed it together and made it into an extended poem that, well, you'll see what I'm doing here, but it becomes 10 stanzas of 5 lines each. And instead of simply being called Missing in the poetry collection, it's called Missing a Psalm. Missing. Had the boy, such a smart 5-year-old, not unlocked a door and walked away? Had his mother not been bedridden by fever in their 3 upstairs rented rooms? Had the boy, for half an hour, not bounced a rubber ball off a vacant building? Had his aunt not arrived to nurse her sister and noticed at once his absence? Had the boy by this time not been thirsty? Had his mother not begun to cry? Had the boy not asked for a free paper cup of ice water at the nearby store? Had the man who sold ice cream not refused, shouting from behind a showcase, buy something or leave? Had the boy's mother not said, where on earth could he have gone to? Had he not meandered 3 blocks to the A&P to drink from its ice-cold fountain? Had his aunt not walked fruitlessly to each room's windows? Had a creek and railroad tracks not been across the street from the grocery? Had the boy not followed them past the mill and picked his way to the river? Had his aunt, after an hour, not called the police? Had she not been told to give the boy longer to show up? Had the boy for 15 minutes not tossed stones into the reeking water? Had the boy's mother not read him his father's letters from Vietnam? Had another boy a year before not drowned in that river? Had the boy not retraced his steps from railroad tie to railroad tie? Had those letters not taught the boy loneliness? Had another boy a month before not fallen under a train? Had those letters from Vietnam not stopped? Had another boy the week before not been abducted and killed? Had his mother not feared for the boy's life? Had the boy not imagined being missing in action like his father? Had his aunt not sat sentry for news? Had a man not waved and asked the boy where he lived? Had the boy, eager to be admired, not repeated his address perfectly? Had the man not walked beside him along the tracks that led back to the 3 rooms? Had the tracks not closely paralleled the creek in its flourish of undergrowth? Had the creek not dipped into a narrow, shrouded valley? Had his mother not listened with diminishing hope for a door to open? Had a man not been fishing in the shadows? Had she not imagined a future of bloodhounds? Had the fisherman not decided what he saw was not a father and son? Had he not called and scrambled up the weed-choked bank? Had the friendly man not run? Had the fisherman not held the boy's hand until the boy turned left into an alley? Had the boy's aunt, waiting for longer to expire, not kept sitting sentry at the top of the stairs? Had the alley not led to the house with 3 upstairs rented rooms? Had there not been a bell that rang when the boy passed through like a customer? Had his aunt not cursed, mistaking the stranger for a man with second thoughts? Had that man not said he was a father, too, of 3 who were small? Had the boy's mother not appeared, swaying beside his aunt? Had she not caught her balance? Had she not beckoned the boy, suggesting he choose between pizza and hot dogs? Had she not embraced him, offering a cup of ice-cold water? Had she not kissed his cheeks, praising him with a promise of ice cream in a showcase of flavors? Now, the second one is actually this one's sort of biographical because it's my sister's situation and she doesn't know, but I wrote this little story and it's in my second collection of Flash, The History of the Baker's Dozen. After hospice, the uses for liquor. House cleaning, the new widow finds a box of partially filled liquor bottles her husband had moved from Colorado, keeping them to use only when the friends he'd shared them with came to visit in Delaware. Those friends only, he'd said, no exceptions. But no one for 30 years had visited from Colorado, the carefully packaged box forgotten. Could all those liquors still be good? For nearly 40 years, she'd sipped her social drinks only when she needed to, when her husband had asked, when he was entertaining clients, when drinks were investments as useful as the mementos she'd boxed and brought from Colorado, her father's tools, her mother's coffee pot, and cookbooks and baking tins. What they'd always agreed upon, preservation was important, waste unacceptable. And now that these bottles needed a use to find them, she began to empty them, starting with easy recipes, making preserved figs by letting them marinate in sweet brandy, by using the gin for a bowl of what one of her cookbooks called maple macerated berries, infusing them with a mixture of salt, lime juice, and what was left in that bottle. And then she began to bake. She measured a portion of the bourbon for brown sugar pound cake, brushing a syrup infused with it over the top, sampling small slices for weeks. She added a part of the vodka to the dough for a cherry almond pie. She finished the bourbon by preparing honey peach preserves. What the cookbook claimed was a match made in heaven when fresh thyme tied everything together. She concocted vanilla ice cream into Brennan's Banana Foster, burning off the sauce made from butter, brown sugar, cinnamon, and the Colorado rum. The hospice had been long-term, a paradox she had embraced and then dreaded. She did not make Steak Diane, her husband's restaurant favorite, refusing all of the red meat recipes. but she prepared shrimp vodka, pasta, pork with mango and rum sauce, and tequila glazed chicken thighs. At last, as the anniversary of her husband's death approached, all of the bottles but one were empty. She set them on the windowsills of her bedroom where they caught the late afternoon light in shades of green and blue and something suggestively pink that she rearranged so that it would deepen before the others. Satisfied, she began to make fruit cakes, 6 of them, as many as she had the Colorado cognac for. Using one of her husband's shot glasses, she divided that cognac into 1 1/2 ounce portions. Slowly and carefully, she poured them over the fruitcakes, pleased when barely any ran off. The tins were already lined with plastic wrap. Because she had emptied an entire shelf, there was room for all 6 in the refrigerator. She knew that fruitcake lasted and lasted. That night, she dated each tin. She could still be eating them a year from now, maybe more. A few small slices might outlive her. Though they had never had children, her brother had 4, more than enough to take care of things after her death. One of them would find the last partially eaten cake, notice the date, and be filled with wonder the way small ancient artifacts preserved in glaciers or peat bogs strike awe in their discoverers. This dessert she had baked gone on for something like forever. Now, okay, this last one, I just wanted to, this is a 100-word story. Actually, as it turns out, because I'm still working on it, I added 2 words an hour ago, so it has 102. So it still needs some work, but I wanted to do something that was just brand new, and it's meant for a 100-word story since they're reading right now, and it's nonfiction for once. And I'm just going to try this one out on you. It's called Luck. 3 years old, sitting on a stool for dinner, my daughter rocked herself back, then forward, then back while I managed one stop before she toppled, flung backwards toward the raised stone fireplace. I lunged too late and saw she'd missed splitting the back of her head by less than an inch. For weeks, that spot a finger's width from the right angle of stone demanded my eyes down as I passed, voicing chance and miracle. Though lately, my student, 19 and luckless, fell down a flight of stone stairs, her head snapping exactly to an edge with enough force to kill her. Thanks.
Thank you, Gary. I was listening to that last story thinking, what words would I take out? I don't think any.
Well,
Again,
yeah, I got to
got
get rid
you.
of 2, but
Yeah,
I'll find them. Yeah.
yeah, that was wonderful. Brilliant, Gary. Gary Fink, thank you for being with us tonight. Okay, next we're going to hear from Andrea Marcusa. Her writings have appeared in the Gettysburg Review, Moon City Review, Milk Candy Review, Citron Review, and others. She's received recognition in a range of competition, including Smoke Long Best Microfiction, Cleaver, and is the author of the chapbook, What We Now Live With, Bottle Cap Press. She's a member of the faculty at the Writers Studio in New York City. For more information, visit AndreaMarcusa.com or see her on Blue Sky, Andrea Marcusa. Andrea Marcusa.
Thank you, Francine. And Gary, that was really great. Thank you so much. I'm going to read 3 pretty short pieces. 2 are like 250 words, and the last one is like 400 words. The first one, just appeared this week in Gooseberry Pie. Thank you, Jeff, who's here today. And some of you have heard this before, but I thought since it's just appeared again, I would give it a read. It's called F Word. Thank you, Mom, for always yelling fuck in traffic, teaching me the power of a word that during my 10th summer rescued me from the name loser when I, a squeaky mouthed and itching for attention, lost card games at the beach picnic tables. Younger than most of the kids by 2 grades, the group tolerated or teased me, calling me chipmunk or monk, mocking my fanged teeth and overbite, until I muttered, fuck, and turned their teasing into laughter. I lived for that table, for the moments when I slipped ice cubes into boys' pockets, waited for the puddles to appear, and someone yelled, yo, you peed your pants, dude, while I, grinning, looked down at my cards. That was the summer some kids hid in bathroom stalls to suck each other's necks until they bloomed red with hickeys, while the meaning of the word fuck was still a mystery, despite our viewing the act on porn sites, all of us pressed around a glowing phone screen, and I and the other girls pretended we weren't freaked out by the dazed woman with huge boobs getting jackhammered by faceless men. But the expression fuck was mine, a secret weapon tucked in my back pocket, my talisman in a world of strange face-sucking and older girls sprouting boobs and pubic hair. I slipped it into my pop songs, whispered it when rain soaked our game, crowed it when the sun shone, rang it out like a police siren, because some girls were afraid to say it, and some of the shyer boys too. It was the giant pedestal I stood upon, my middle name, fuck. So, by the way, my mother did not teach me the word fuck. She's probably dying. She went to mass every week. So anyway, the next piece is a piece that I just started last week in Francine's workshop, which if you haven't given it a try, it was great. I was really thrilled. Another story about my mother. This is called $11. My mother only had $11 until the end of the month. We drove around town checking the prices of gas stations. Finally, she pulled into one with rusting pumps and a skivvy-looking guy, the smell of gasoline and oil so strong that it seeped into our car. The gas station attendant eyed her, then me, and finally our dented, rusting heap. $3 worth, my mother said, with an air of nonchalance, even though I knew that underneath she felt anything but that. In 1970, $3 mounted to 8 gallons, enough to keep us going for a while at least. She handed the man a 10. For change, he counted out 7 $1 bills, drawing out each bill as slowly as he could while eyeing my mother's tan arms, the knit shirt that outlined the shape of her breasts, and the little rings of sweat that had formed under her arms from the heat. When he reached the $5th, his eyes traveled to me and where my shorts had bunched up around the top of my thighs. Then the sun-bleached blonde hair on my arms and legs, and the tiny rosebuds of breasts under my shirt. I wanted to straighten out my shorts, but his look was so imposing and persistent, I froze. Finally, he held out the bills to my mother. Mom rolled down the window, snatched the wad, and then swiftly cracked up the window. Neither of us said a word as she gunned the accelerator and pulled out of there in a cloud of dust. But the smell of the gasoline and oil stayed in the car like a bad thought for the rest of the day. And this is a piece I started during the pandemic. And I don't know if you all are like this, but sometimes you just have a piece that just keeps turning into another piece and another piece and another piece. This piece started out about 2 gay men in Paris. And when you see what it is, it's now a husband and wife. And I started it during the pandemic, and it just kept changing. So, okay, it's called Risks. Let's pretend the metal chair never met stone, and you never crumpled to the ground. Let's pretend Malcolm never skittered beneath the bed where he stayed for days. Let's pretend your hair never turned sticky and ruddy red, and there was no need to shake your shoulders, pleading for your eyes to open, because despite the illusion of sleep, they never did. Let's pretend you listened to your physician and had not waved off those tests, calling them alarmist ravings of medical nerds. Let's pretend that this risk you were taking, one in a long, lucky list of them, was undone by a flicker of instinct, some divine whisper, or perhaps my earnest urging. Let's pretend we postponed our Paris flight and learned, even though you were only 47, that your discomfort wasn't simple indigestion. And now, months later, the two of us, not just me and Malcolm, are back in Paris in our favorite room, number 4A. Let's pretend you were sitting on this terrace with Malcolm at your feet purring, and you're calling him your fat Persian king. You lift your glass, not wine, but sparkling water, and with a touch of irony, you assess the exquisite bouquet and the lively mouthfeel, alternating between curses and thanks to what you now call the magical medical gods. Let's pretend you look out over Paris's blue gold dusk and let at me and say, there's no bliss like this. You reach for my hand and I join you at the rickety balcony table, then gaze out at the ribboning streets, the sidewalks, filling with couples, and hold your hand tight. Indoors, on your side of the king-size bed, sit the stacks of novels you always bring and never read. Beyond that, your shaving kit spills its contents onto the bathroom sink. The tiny closet brims with our clothes. Let's pretend you finished your glass of water and come in from the terrace. Let's pretend we leave Malcolm lazing on our bed, head to the lobby, and feel the whoosh as the door opens onto Avenue Kléber. Let's pretend we glow in the lamplight and shimmer in headlights as we walk arm in arm. The only ambulance siren, miles and miles away.
Thank you, Andrea. Beautiful.
Thank you.
And it was interesting to hear what you did with the prompt. The prompt was write a story about $11. So that was interesting. Yeah, Andrea Marcusa, thank you for being with us tonight and for helping me out, making sure that no one's breaking in here. I also wanted to mention, since you brought it up, and there's a few of my workshop people here, I do this pop-up workshop every other week or so. It's a pop-up. It's on a very freewheeling basis. There's no long-term commitment, and I don't advertise it on social media, but I do have a mailing list, and anybody's welcome to join. I try to keep it very affordable. And if you have any questions or like to be put on my mailing list, just send me a note at francinewitte.com and let me know. Okay, and so next we'll move on to Sandra Arnold, who is she's reading to us from New England and from Saturday, where it's Saturday. I'm sorry, New Zealand, where it's Saturday. So I love that, So Sandra Arnold is an award-winning writer from New Zealand with 8 published books, including novels, short fiction, flash fiction, and nonfiction. She has an M.Lit and PhD in creative writing from Central Queensland University, Australia. Sandra Arnold.
Thank you, Francine. I'm going to read 2 stories today. Some of my stories come from direct observation, and others are just words that form in my head, and I've got an example of both of those today. So this first one, which is called An Old Man, a Dog and a List, was based on something I observed when I was sitting in the doctor's waiting room, and an old man came shuffling in holding a toy dog, which he was obviously very attached to. It made me feel so sad that when I went home, I had to sit down and write about it to try to make sense of it in my own head. An old man, a dog and a list. Meg breathes a sigh of relief to find the doctor's waiting room empty. She sits down, still too angry to cry. She just needs a few quiet minutes before her appointment while she writes out a list of how irritating Simon has been and what he needs to do about it. It isn't as if she doesn't have her own issues to deal with. Simon is apparently oblivious to. After a few minutes, the door opens and an old man shuffles into the waiting room, balancing on his walking stick, clutching a toy dog with long floppy ears. He eases himself into his seat, holds the dog close to his chest, and strokes it as if it's a puppy. Sometimes he bends his head and murmurs into the dog's ear, and then kisses its nose. Meg glances up at him, relieved for his sake that there's no one else in the room who might stare at him. The doctor comes in, smiles at the man, and gestures for him to follow her. Half an hour later, he shuffles out again and wanders over to the reception desk. While he sorts out his money, he carefully sits the dog against the glass panel of the desk that shields the receptionist from germ-breathing patients. Meg feels tears trickle down her cheek as she watches him. Who's taking care of him? Did he walk here alone? Does he live alone? Has his real dog died recently? Why is he holding a toy dog in such a way? Is that the only thing left in his life to love? Meg swipes at her tears with the back of her hand, and with that gesture comes a memory of herself at 15 in a grocery store. An elderly couple had staggered in, pulling a wooden dog on wheels. The other customers in the shop moved away, their attention suddenly focused on items on the shelves. The shop assistant spoke to the couple and asked about the dog. They chatted about how good he'd been lately. No trouble at all, they chorused. Meg squinted at the shop assistant in disbelief and shook her head. The assistant frowned at her. When the couple left, pulling the wooden dog behind them, the assistant whispered to Meg, "Show some compassion, young lady. They're lucky they've still got each other at their age. You might not believe it, but you'll be old one day." Meg scowled at her. "I'd shoot myself before I ended up like that," she responded, before spinning around and turning and striding out the shop. 5 decades later, Meg is watching an old man pay his medical bill. She watches him pick up his toy dog and clutch it to his chest. She watches him shuffle out, his head bent over the dog. When the door closes behind him, Meg stares at the empty space he's left. She stares down at the list she's written for Simon. She stares back at the empty space. And that story was published in Fictive Dream and Flash Fiction February in England. The next one is called The End of the Line Cafe. And the only part of it that's actually real is where I live. I live in an old cottage in South Canterbury, which is in the area, is about 150 years old when the settlers came out from England to farm the area. And all the time I'm walking around this place, I think about the people who lived here at one time, and I try to imagine them, all the love, the hatred, the petty jealousies, the hard work, everything. They're almost real. They're not. I don't see ghosts, but I wrote a story similar about that. It's called The End of the Line Cafe. It was after we drove past that little rundown cafe off the main highway that Hughie told me he wanted to sell the house we'd lived in for 25 years. I looked at him open-mouthed. He said the place needed a young couple with the sort of energy and enthusiasm that we'd once had for the constant maintenance of our property. Repainting the weatherboards, spraying the roof for moss, mowing the lawns, trimming the trees. The work was endless, he said. He wanted more time for golf now that he was retired. Reluctantly, I agreed to contact a real estate agent. After we signed the contract with the agent, Hughie said we should celebrate and brought out a bottle of champagne he'd been saving. We sat on the veranda, overlooking our flower-filled garden, and drank it. The sky was so blue and the grass of the neighboring farm so green, and the mountains in the distance so purple. The only sounds were birds singing, blackbirds, thrushes, fantails, quails. I couldn't help the tears gathering in the back of my eyes, partly because the idea of living in a sterile apartment in the city, but mostly because a move away from this place meant a permanent goodbye to the original inhabitants. Some of them had come out here 150 years ago with the first settlers from Britain. I loved working in the garden, listening to their stories of farming the land, building their homes, even feeling their heartbreak after the death of their children, because there were no doctors back then. I was intrigued by their incredible optimism in the face of the hardship of their lives. On the last day, as our furniture was being piled into the removal van, I wandered around the garden to say goodbye. All those who had given me the gift of their stories were going about their business as usual. Digging, planting, hanging out washing, shearing sheep, milking cows, cooking, feeding children. They paused and looked at me as I walked among them. I promised I wouldn't forget. I promised I would keep their stories safe. They nodded, gave me a final wave, and carried on with their work. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Sandra. I always like to say to you that I could just listen to you read the phone book, but your gorgeous accent, but your stories were wonderful. Just spellbinding. Someone said spellbinding right in the chat. So thank you for being here with us tonight or tomorrow, as is more accurate. Sandra Arnold, all the way from New Zealand. All right, next we're going to hear, we have two more readers. And if you think we're lightening up on how wonderful these readings are, well, you'd be wrong, because we have two more wonderful readers. And one of them is Brad Rose. He's the author of 7 collections of poetry and flash fiction. I wouldn't say that exactly. Word and Edgewise, Lucky Animals. No, wait, I can explain. Pink X-Ray, Detonations, and Momentary Turbulence. His new book of prose poems, or words to that effect, is forthcoming. Brad's poetry and fiction have appeared in the American Journal of Poetry, the Los Angeles Times, Baltimore Review, New York Quarterly, Lunch Ticket, and other journals and anthologies. His website is bradrosepoetry.com. Brad Rose.
Thanks, Francine. Man, I'm scared to read these now. These people are so good. It's scary. Anyway, I'm going to read 6 one-paragraph pieces. They're all really short. The first two appeared recently in 6 sentences and are consequently 6 sentences. First one's called Evidently I've Got Electromagnetism. Some people say my arches are so high that I'll never be a successful parachutist, but I tell them even a superhighway has soft shoulders. Since September, I've been involved in a weekly kissing tutorial with a talented Miss Pepper. Thank goodness the Constitution guarantees a right to habeas corpus. Whenever I wear my medical colors, I notice that suddenly I come down with all the symptoms of a good time. Science has found that atoms are filled with empty space. If you're lucky in life, most things will never happen to you. Governor's pardon. I'm air-conditioned. I bring my own weather with me. If you steal from yourself, it's not against the law. In a two-way mirror, everyone is their own doppelganger. In fact, yesterday, after the governor failed to grant my pardon, I had to pinch myself to see if I was dreaming. I'll be damned if that anti-aging cream didn't work after all. Light refreshments will be served. How long can it take for a spaceflight to return from Mars? Of course, sex with Neanderthals changed us forever, but the definition of a species is not very clear-cut. For instance, take Satan's incessant virtue signaling. Have you ever been to Boston? Be that as it may, I hope you'll pardon my entry-level faux hawk. Last night, my flight came in a little low, and the unexpected trees were taller than a giraffe's crucifix. Hey, you wouldn't have any more of that delicious barbed wire lasagna on hand, would you? Well, if you insist. Vacuum tubes. This appeared in a journal called the Stickman Review, which has been around for a while, about 15 years. Whenever I have trouble remembering names and faces, excuse me, I reverse the direction of my blood. The reality of modern life is that we're interrupted all the time, but you've got to start somewhere. Besides, who knows what the machines are really thinking? Sometimes it's hard to know if this is an archaeological site or a bioluminescent crime scene, but if you wear a thought-diffusing helmet and insulated rubber boots, you too can help prevent alien abductions. I don't want to mention this, but I enrolled in Psychic University's School of Quantum Uncertainty, although it seems they've lost my records again. No big deal. Say, when you get into town, just give me a call. I'll hook up the high-frequency vacuum tubes and tell the admissions office you're ready for almost anything. Live wires. On the other hand, when you're dead, you've got to wear something, preferably the perfect blend of comfort and performance. Of course, there's something very special about continuing to receive your paychecks, but maybe I'm just looking on the bright side. You know me, I'm someone who embraces my shortcomings by buying a pair of fun-colored stilts. Hey, where do you think all those red wires lead? Really? I was under the impression that in hell, even the eels had grown tired of electrocuting themselves. And the last piece just appeared in a journal called Dog Throat Journal. It's called Do the Best You Can with What You've Got. As career day approaches, I'm wondering, is an axe tattoo really the best long-term investment for me? I mean, from a skeleton crew's perspective. I guess there's no real reason to fear the alphabet, but I'm a glass half empty kind of dude, just waiting for the other flip-flop to fall. No use lollygagging around until the crows come home. Hey, hand me those kittens, would you? No, just one at a time. Obviously, a chainsaw would make it easier. Here, let me show you how it's done. Thank you.
Wow, Brad Rose, mind bending as always. I think we all can agree that as we're listening, it's like there's one thought folding over another, and wait. Where's he going? Really amazing, brilliant. Thank you, Brad. Brad Rose.
Francine.
All right, our final reader for tonight is Zvi A. Sesling, from Brookline, the Massachusetts poet, Brookline, Massachusetts Poet Laureate 2017 to 2020, has published numerous poems and flash fiction. He edits 10 by 10 flash fiction stories. His flash fiction books are 40 Stories with Paul Beckman, Secret Behind the Gate, and Wheels. Sesling lives in Brookline, Mass. With his wife, Suzanne J. Decter. Zvi Sesling. Zvi, we lose you. Let me see. Oh, Zvi's here.
Yep.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Anyway, I got an email from Francine tonight that said, "You're the last reader. Please end before midnight." And of course, I'm only kidding, but I do, if you're interested, there's a magazine called Rural Fiction Magazine. I have a story in there on March 4th. And I will have one in Gooseberry Pie that Jeff Harvey edits on April 17th, I think was the date he told me. And I have 3 or 4 others that are out. I had one in Punk Noir not long ago that Cindy tipped me off about the magazine, and I thank her for that. Anyway, my first story is called Big Muddy. Some Fridays we would skip classes. The county built a new school to replace the old one-room edifice that accommodated 50 of us from kindergarten to 12th grade. In place of the four, in the old place, if 4 of us were missing, Mrs. Campbell knew immediately. But in the new place, with some students from 2 other schools near our Iowa village, they never noticed if one was absent. Anyway, Hank, Cody, Ralph, and me took off on a nice day in October and headed down to the edge of Bellows Farm on a patch of field that sat across from Illinois at the edge of the Mississippi River. We were trying for trout, but ended up mostly with catfish, which none of us cared for, and we would throw them in a big bucket and decide later what to do with them. Sometimes we decided to leave them in the bucket and not worry what happened. Other times we would toss them on the grass, let them flop around until they died. Other times, feeling generous, one of us would suggest we toss them back in the Big Muddy, and they would take off like a ghost was chasing them. Today, however, we caught 4 trout and 3 catfish that we put in the bucket. Hank filleted the trout, Ralph did the beheading ceremonies, Cody packed them in mud, and I dug a pit and gathered wood to start a fire. Hank and Cody snuck onto Bellows Farm and picked 8 ears of late corn and a leftover watermelon from the patch. We put the mud-packed trout in the fire and let them bake a good long time along with the corn that we had also covered with mud. We let them all cool, and when they were good and hard, we took rocks, cracked them open. They were clean, well cooked, and we sure did enjoy them. A few weeks later, we went fishing again, and this time only got a bunch of catfish, which of course we tossed in the bucket. An old man came along and saw the catfish in the bucket. "You young fellas gonna eat those old boys?" "Nope, none of us like catfish," I said. "Well, can I ask if I can have these boys? They'll make a good meal for my wife, boys, and me." We all looked at each other. Hank nodded okay. The rest in unison said sure. The old man thanked us, picked up the bucket, said he would be back shortly with it, and headed somewhere on a path through the cornfield. We hung around a while, but didn't catch any more fish. Then we played that state capital game where one of us named a state and someone had to name the capital. That went on for a little while, and then the old man came back with the bucket and 4 corncob pipes and some tobacco, and showed us how to fill the bowl, light the tobacco, take a puff, being careful not to inhale. We all tried and started coughing. The old man laughed and told us to ease up, try again, and be sure not to inhale. We thanked him, and again he took the path through the cornfield. We stayed behind, trying to puff on the pipe, and after more coughing, gave up and headed home. We were probably the only farm boys who could not smoke. This one is called When the War Ended. When the war ended, he returned home, finding his wife had run off with his high school buddy, the divorce papers at his mother's house, and his house sold. He wandered around, and finding himself at Jimmy Z's bar, he downed 3 whiskeys and 4 beers, started 2 fights, and got thrown out, laying down in the back alley where he slept near a dumpster. Rats kept waking him until a police cruiser stopped, pulled him in, drove him to jail, where the cell cot proved to be good for more sleep. Released in the morning, he thanked a kind police sergeant who was an Army vet and returned to his mother's house, who, with her boyfriend, was off in the Caribbean. They would not be back for a few weeks, so he sat in the living room couch with 2 cans of warm beer he found in a cabinet, turned on the TV news, and watched the final withdrawal from Saigon. Swearing under his breath as he watched, he rolled a stick, took a few drags, then lumbered upstairs to his old bedroom, muttering, "Fucking surrendered. They fucking surrendered, and we're treated like fucking piranhas. No, wait, that's pariahs. Yeah, just plain old fucking pariahs." In the bedroom, he saw pictures of his heroes glued to the wall, actors who play soldiers who never died. Oh, they got wounded and still fought but never died. They were role models, so he enlisted, fought for his country the way he was supposed to, defending his country against the evil communist hordes. He was told over and over, if one country is commie, they were all commie. His Purple Heart was burned along with weed sticks to smoke back at the base. He fell asleep staring at John Wayne, then awoke, showered, shaved, ate a hastily made sandwich, downed the remaining warm beer, and took a number 6 bus to the south side of town where his ex-wife and her boyfriend, his old buddy, lived. She answered when he rang the bell, looking surprised to see him. He asked if he could come in. She hesitated, asked what he wanted, and he said to talk. She let him in, insisting the boyfriend join them, and he agreed. He had a lot of questions but could not answer, they could not answer, and told him there was no real sense to going on, and said it was best if he left and not return. His answer was to say the war finally ended, the enemy was dead. He saw it on TV, mighty Americans surrendering to a bunch of jungle yahoos. Then he pulled out a pistol and shot them both. And finally, this is called Bottom of the Bottle. I think I've lost you here somehow. Hold on. Oh, there we go. Okay, this is called Bottom of the Bottle. Last story, about 150 words. He was looking through the bottom of the bottle at the drunks on the Boston Common, at the druggies with needles, at the hoity-toity with briefcases. He had been at the top, been on top of her before she left him for the governor whose wife was already dead and where he wanted to be, but he found the bottle easier. Merlot and Chardonnay, his pals. The world looks so different through the bottom of the bottle. Red to see the dead, the ones who never return. White for the world of friends who slept on the Boston Common benches and in the public gardens. The flowers died slower than his friends. He knew through the bottom of the bottle. Back at the Boston Common, he watched them slowly fade away. In the winter, his earlobes could have fallen off, but for the Pine Street Inn rescue. In summer, the police scooted him out of the Common, so he slept in the alleys where he was rolled for the buck or two, or kids would find his bottle, pour it over him. If lucky, he would roll on top of some woman and look at her again through the bottom of the bottle. Blessed are the drunkards who survive their days in hell and think that heaven is a bottle bringing them closer to God. When it is done and over, and they recover or they lose their life, there may be times to recall the past, and the bottle of the bottom is where his life began and ended. Thank you.
Thank you, Zvi Sesling. Okay, so tonight we heard stories that were funny, skillful, mind-bending, elegant, folksy, wise, poignant, among other things, but above all, entertaining and beautifully read, which is why we do this, okay? And I thank you all for being here. I want to thank the readers, Cindy Rosmus, Ron Bass, Bill Merklee, Christopher Bowen, Gary Fincke, Andrea Marcusa, Sandra Arnold, Brad Rose, and Zvi Sesling. And our thoughts go to Paul Beckman, who is, he's in the hospital, and we'll send him all our beautiful, good thoughts because we love Paul, and, I'm sure he'll be fine, but, it's always hard to hear that someone's in the hospital. So anyway, thank you all for being here. I'll turn off the recording. We can hang out in the Zoom room if you want to for a few minutes. And I'm Francine Witte, Zooming to you from New York City. And this is FBOMB Global Flash Reading. Thank you. Good night and drive safely.
Thank you, Francine. It was great.